You know, that famous clip on The View where she says, you know, there's nothing I would do differently. What we reported in the book is that during a commercial break, one of her top aides goes to the View host and says, "Can you ask that question again? Can we try a different answer?" And they ended up not doing it. But they realized sort of in that moment that being linked to Biden in such a dramatic way was not good.
With us today is Josh Dawsey, who was a University of South Carolina Gamecock and now a political investigative reporter for my cherished alma mater, the Wall Street Journal. Josh, when historians look back in 2024, the main story is going to be Trump's remarkable comeback after leaving office in disgrace. And you really capture that. But my biggest takeaway, I guess, was the self-delusion of Joe Biden and team, claiming falsely, first of all, he was the only one that could beat Trump. And they didn't even seem to raise the issue of could this old man serve for 4 more years? I'm much less interested in what the George Clooney's or donors thought than the myopic selfishness of Biden and his advisors.
Well, that was one of our most interesting takeaways, we thought, too, Al, how the folks who are around Biden, his sort of core group of aides, really kept a lot of information from him, kept a lot of people from him, particularly after, you know, that debate in June, sort of the disastrous, infamous debate in June. And what we sort of found here was that there were lots of warning signs throughout the years 2023 and even early 2024, even before the debate. The Democratic Party, you know, the voters did not want Biden. The American public wanted to move on, right? And they sort of like pushed him through. And then after the debate, even as there was a clamoring by senators, members of Congress, you know, everyone sort of under the sun that it was time to go, there was a fierce effort by some of Biden's top aides, Steve Ricchetti, Mike Donilon, and others, to keep the pollsters from meeting with him, to keep campaign staff from meeting with him, to keep a lot of the data information that they were getting from him. It was a pretty aggressive insularity there that's sort of hard to describe.
Yeah, but even in the fall of 2023, you write that some of his closest aides wanted to meet with him and talk about the peril of his candidacy. They couldn't get a meeting. Who were they, and why couldn't they get a meeting with the president?
Well, a lot of what happened there was that in that period of time, that was when the attack with Hamas happened, right? And there was talk in 2023 after his interview with Robert Hur that obviously did not go well. They were under some delusions that it wasn't that awful, but it, you know, did not go well. The numbers were really bad. They were struggling to get donors on board. They were struggling to get fundraisers on board. And there was conversation about whether or not they should ask the president, do you really want to do this again? Do you really want to spend 4 more years doing this? And then the attack with Hamas happens, and they sort of never bring that conversation up to him.
Who are those that wanted to go see him and could not?
Well, I think it was a core group who had concerns were Anita Dunn in the White House. There were other aides on the campaign side that were really concerned. I think Donald and Machete were the only ones, to the best of our knowledge, of his senior folks who were really bought in on a second term and wanted to keep it going no matter what. And probably Anthony Brunel, I would also put in that category, and obviously the First Lady.
Yeah. After Biden belatedly dropped out, James and I thought he should have dropped out a year earlier, almost by default, Kamala Harris, not their strongest candidate, took over. As James has said, if the Philadelphia Eagles went with their fourth-team quarterback, they would not have won the Super Bowl. And I'm not sure she could have won, but I just want to bounce off of you because you certainly get into this. She made 2 colossal mistakes, I thought. One, not striking some distance from Biden, not in an October interview, but at the August convention when people were watching her and getting to know her. Simply saying, I'm very proud of our record, but we do have some differences, especially on affordability and the cost of living. She did not do that. And the other was her choice of Tim Walz, rejecting Josh Shapiro, who Republicans feared the most, as you all write. And they said not good chemistry between Harris and Shapiro. The Pennsylvania governor was too aggressive. In 1960, Lyndon Johnson was a hell of a lot more aggressive than Josh Shapiro and had no chemistry with Jack Kennedy, but JFK picked him because he needed to win. She failed that test too, Josh.
Well, I happened to be with a lot of the senior Trump folks when the Walls announcement came out, just by happenstance, and I mean they were thrilled. I mean the Trump folks were literally thrilled. I mean they, Chris LaCivita, Susie Wiles, his core team thought Josh Shapiro would be a challenging person to run against. They thought he could be more difficult. Not that they thought they would lose, but they thought he was going to be much more challenging. And I think they believe from day one, the Trump side, that Walz was a gift to them. I mean, I happened to see it in real time, some of their reactions. Also, on the other point that you made on the no distance, I mean, there were lots of discussions. We obtained some memos from the book when various folks from the Harris campaign came up with ideas on how could you create distance from the president. What could you do? What could you say? What would it work? And she just wasn't interested. I mean, she wasn't interested. And you know that famous clip on The View where she says, you know, there's nothing I would do differently. What we reported in the book is that during a commercial break, one of her top aides goes to the View host and says, "Can you ask that question again? Can we try a different answer?" And they ended up not doing that. But they realized sort of in that moment that being linked to Biden in such a dramatic way was not good.
The fourth team quarterback. You know, finally, before turning over to James, the Trump team deserves enormous credit for locking up the nomination early and just taking over the Republican Party. But in the general election against mediocre opposition, he managed to win by a little more than a point, the smallest margin by a winning candidate in more than a half century. It was not a big, impressive victory in that sense, yet they've been able to claim a huge mandate, Josh.
Yeah, but I guess what we'll see is how the American public reacts to that in the midterms, right? I mean, he pushed the he calls it the big beautiful bill through Congress, but the numbers are not very high on that right now. Can they make that
Right.
popular? Some of his other things that he's doing, I don't know, are broadly popular. So they're claiming this mandate, and so far, you see the Republican Party totally behind him. I mean, there are no more, you know, Bob Corkers, there are no more Jeff Flakes, or is no one speaking out saying, you know, Tom Tillis, I guess, is a lone exception here and maybe masking in the House, but most of these guys are totally gone and everyone's following Trump. And he's claiming this mandate on all of these issues across the board. I guess the jury's still out on whether or not the American public will want that to continue.
James.
So Josh, this program is probably more than anything else was consistent in its view that Biden shouldn't run for re-election. We were consistent and we were vocal. All right, we have a
Sure.
point of disagreement. Al and I do. I want you to weigh in on it. Biden gets out July the 21st, and I had written 2 weeks earlier there should be a competitive process that President Clinton Obama should invite to have town halls and have like a cattle call and the class should all go open. All right. On the 21st, I think they still could have tried something. Al said it was too late. They had no other choice but to go with Harris. I think that's the parameters of the disagreement we had. In your mind, could a process be set up or something could be done to have some kind of a competitive process for the nomination between July the 21st and the start of the convention?
I mean, I think if they really wanted to, sure. I mean, you change the rules, you move heaven and earth, you do it, right? I mean, that's the Democrats certainly told us at the time, and in the reporting for this book. But one of the reasons there was no competitive primaries, there was no time. They couldn't have done it. But I mean, you guys have both been around for a long time and watched a lot of things. People always say they can't do things unless they really want to do them, and then they try to do them, right? I mean, I think early on when Biden's getting out, there are luminaries in the party who believe, you know, we talk about Pelosi a little bit in the book. We talk about, you know, others who believe there could have been a primary, that they wanted to see a
Trying to
primary,
call people on the 21st.
right? That they believe
They called Biden
there
from
could have been a primary.
God,
So,
James, my favorite Gamecock voted against me.
Well, Al, I tried not to vote against you. I tried to give a diplomatic answer that no one was mad
no,
about.
it's one of these things that it just it stimulates the thought process. So I want to talk about Mike and Biden. They seem to be. Would you agree that this was principally Biden? I'm going to do it, and Mike was the kind of enforcer here, and this is what's going to happen, and we'll do this at all costs. Is that
Yeah,
your
and
sense?
Ricchetti. And Machete.
Ricchetti, okay. Mike Dunlin, just so people know, was one of the 3 best political consultants I ever knew in my life. When I was doing this for a living, he was the #1 guy. He was a good poster. He was a great strategist. He had clear level judgment. And I think, and I'm going to ask you to react to this, that there was this, we don't get any goddamn respect. We 2 Irish guys here. You did all of this. The fucking Obama people didn't like you. The Clinton people thought they had reinvented the wheel. And goddamn it, you showed them, and we're going to show them again. Did that kind of bunker mentality play into this?
100%. I mean, I think that's a lot of what happened here. In 2016, Obama didn't want Biden to run. Then later, there's questions from Obama and others, should Biden run? There are people who've underestimated Biden, I think, for his whole career. People told him he couldn't do this, he couldn't do that. I think he certainly had a chip on his shoulder about that. And I think Donilon and Ricchetti did as well, 100%.
Man, you look back at this and you just marvel at how smart people all drank the same Kool-Aid, and that's what they were drinking, this fucking Kool-Aid. All right, I mean, I know that. And Mike, so Al has an observation, and I'll flush it out. I think I agree with him. There were more employees than advisors.
That's right.
So Clinton, I can't tell you the number of times that he said, I don't want that fucking guy around me anymore, James. All he does is agree with me. I mean, that was just part of the, but I don't think there was that kind of culture in the Biden inner circle where
There wasn't.
You disagree, but all right, okay.
Yeah, there wasn't. And I think the folks who disagreed near the end, were totally blocked out. I mean, when one of the pollsters we have in the book, Jeff Guerin, comes in and gives a presentation to the top aides about, sort of how dire things look, Ricchetti tells him, your job was to tell us how we could win. It was not to deliver bad news like that. And, Pete Aguilar, we quote in the book, is going, to Ricchetti and saying, we're going to lose all these seats in the House. We're going to lose all these seats in the Senate. You guys realize how bad it is. And Ricchetti says, no one's telling us that. He goes, well, you tell the president. Schumer in the book sort of complains to others that he doesn't think anything he's saying to Biden's top aides is actually getting to the president. I mean, there wasn't room for dissent. I mean, one of the things we have, I think, is just kind of an amazing anecdote. Adrian Elrod, who was on the campaign, one of, longtime Democratic consultant, there's concern about, none of the money's coming in after the debate. They can't raise money anymore. Polling's looking bad. There's concern they can't get to Biden. So what does Adrian Elrod do? She calls Morning Joe, tells Morning Joe what they wanted to say on air the next morning because they think Biden's going to be watching it while he's at the gym working out, right? I mean, there was a lot of folks who were really, really frustrated by the fact that dissent was not really allowed in Biden's inner circle.
So I'm sorry, Al, but I used to call Jeff Garrett on his running campaign Eeyore. He'd love to tell you bad news.
he learned that from his mentor, Peter Hart.
Election when they're telling you bad news. He and Greenberg too. Yeah. Go ahead.
I got old Peter Hart memos. He was our pollster at the Wall Street Journal, Josh, and nobody was better at delivering bad news than Peter. I'm going to come back to Biden in a minute, but on your chapter on one chapter on Trump called Paranoia, but even apart from the Butler shooting, there was cause for paranoia, I gather, wasn't there?
Yeah, I mean, the Iranians wanted Trump dead. I mean, when the FBI and the intelligence community briefed Trump's top aides, they said they're trying to get, kill squads in the country to take you out. They were flying decoy planes. A lot of times the Secret Service was trying. For the Secret Service, their main concern with Trump was that Trump had the same patterns. He went to the same few places. He went at the same times every week, right? The golf course, his own clubs. He didn't really do things that were unpredictable. And so they were trying to, change things up a little bit, right? I mean, one of the things that's in the book, they have a lot of fear. They're driving in Pennsylvania, leaving an event, and there's a drone trailing the motorcade for like 30, 45 minutes. Can't shake the drone, right? There are other times where Secret Service tells folks from the Trump campaign, we're going to board the plane differently underneath, a hangar instead of like we usually do, right? We want people to get on in certain ways. I mean, there was, anytime you're sort of afraid of threats after, the bullet hit his ear and then the other guy who was found, in the golf club in the bushes, you always then probably are a little more paranoid. But according to the briefings that Trump's folks were getting from the government, there was also reason to be paranoid.
Yeah. You talked about Steve Ricchetti and Mike Donlin. I just want to ask you about a couple more. The power couple who were so celebrated were Anita Dunn and her husband Bob Bauer. Anita Dunn led the case for an early debate. Bob Bauer allowed the special counsel to interview Biden for 5 hours over 2 days. I think those both were cases of political malpractice, and they deserve to be the criticism they're getting. Now, if you disagree, please tell me. And I read in your book about Ron Klain. He seems to have it both ways. I mean, I'll read one chapter, and Ron Klain is saying, really he ought to get out, and then at the end, no, he ought to stay in. So just give me your reactions to those three.
Yeah, well, the argument that Anita Dunn and others, we obtained this sort of 6-page memo that they sent Biden on the debates. And what they say to him in this memo is, we believe you will be able to reach the widest possible audience early in the debate. You're able, to show America that you're better than Trump. You're able to expose some of what he is. And they say, quote unquote, while there's no perfect time to schedule a debate, we have identified an ideal window in late June for the first debate, and they wanted him to debate early. Now, I will say, maybe I'll get in trouble for saying this, but I will say I think that's somewhat evidence that there wasn't this cover up in every way that some other folks have alleged, right? If you really believe that your principal from some of these folks are so out of it and so addled and can't make sentences, do you say, I want you to debate early for an hour and a half on live TV so we can
Good
do
point.
2 or 3 debates? I mean, there
Good
is
point.
something there that's kind of interesting, right? But the memo, one of the things that's in the book is that when Robert Hur's interviewing Biden, and Biden's memory is really bad on everything, Hur leaves the first night. It's a 2-day interview, and says to others at the Department of Justice and FBI, we can't figure out if he's playing us or not. He can't answer any of the questions. Is this a game? Is this an act? I mean, he was stunned at how bad his memory was. And it sort of tells you how long some of these Biden folks had been with him and how desensitized they were, because they sat through the same interview and Bauer and crew thought it went fine.
Jeez. Hunter Biden was a figure in the president's mind throughout all this, the very troubled son who was facing criminal charges. I can't get over this. If Biden had gotten out in 2023, as he should have, and been a bridge, as he once said he was going to be, I don't know the Hunter problems would have gone away, but they sure as hell would have been eased. And they never seem to realize that, Josh.
Yeah, that's right. And Biden was obsessed with the Hunter situation. I mean, folks close to him said he believed that, they were going after Hunter to get him, and that he was sort of responsible for some of Hunter's problems. And that after living a pretty sordid and dark and, drug-filled life, Hunter Biden had gotten back on the right track, and he thought it was, highly unfair what was happening to him. And in 2024, as sort of the foreign trips are happening, as he's raising money, as he's preparing for the debate, several people told us for the book that he was fixated on Hunter's trial. He called Abby Lowell, Hunter's lawyer, and said, "Can I come testify on behalf of my son?" I mean, can you guys imagine what a spectacular, remarkable moment that would be if the president of the United States flew to Delaware and got on the defense stand for his son? But he wanted to testify, right? He was concerned about his son's money. He was trying to figure out how to make sure everything was paid for. He was talking to Hunter all the time, and Hunter was joining calls with White House officials. I mean, one of the scenes in the book is that They're doing this call when the Supreme Court rules on immunity, right, and says presidents can be immune for any official act. They're figuring out how Biden should respond, and all of a sudden a voice pipes in that no one knows who it is, and it's Hunter. And the White House counsel's office, is why is Hunter Biden on this call discussing how he respond to his decision? But Hunter was just a major figure in his dad's life. And Biden's defenders would say, of course, he's a loving father. He loves his son. His son was in a horrible predicament. But to White House aides, it was a point of frustration because they couldn't talk about it, right? Biden didn't want to talk about his son's criminal problems. He didn't want to talk about how it affected his election. I mean, one of the scenes in the book was they come in to brief. The White House is trying to put together a briefing for Biden and Joe Biden about what all is going to happen with Hunter in 2023 and 2024, or what could happen. And Biden just wasn't interested in talking about it.
Well, I admire his love for his son, but I will always think if he'd gotten out when he should have, it might have been a lot easier. Let me ask one final question and then turn it over to James. As James mentioned, throughout 2023, we both railed against Biden running again. I wrote several columns. I think it was a cataclysmic mistake. It was a mistake for his legacy, for his party, and it gave us Trump. But I think it's nonsense when I hear Republicans and even some journalists say this was worse than Watergate. That would be true only if there were examples of dangerous decisions or poor policies that were made due to his clear cognitive slippage. But yet, I haven't read anything on that, including in your excellent book. I think this was more a tragedy than a scandal.
I would see a lot of it as a tragedy, as well. I think a lot of our sources saw it that way. I'm not, comparing it to Watergate. I think what our book showed, frankly, was there were good days where Biden struggled to remember names of senators and wasn't particularly, with it in meetings. And there were also days where he was much sharper. I mean, one of the final scenes in the book, he's meeting with Trump after the election. They have a 90-minute wide-ranging discursive meeting, and Trump walks out and says to Susie Wiles, where was that guy during the debate? Right? I mean, Biden was much sharper that day and quite good, according to, the way they saw it. So,
but you guys didn't come up with any, really bad policy decisions made because he was losing it. He was not mentally there.
I don't think we write about any sort of bad policy decisions because he was losing it. I think we write sort of about his acuity at times. But I mean, frankly, Al, this was sort of a campaign book, and we didn't really dive into every single policy decision made in the White House and what a lot of that was about, right? We focused mainly on the campaign.
James Carville.
So, Josh, let's go to me, the most important date in the modern Democratic Party, and that is July the 21st, the year 2024. Take us a little bit through when did the president notify the vice president that he wasn't going to run? How was the decision made that they were just going to keep the same manager, the same strategist, the same headquarters, the same furniture, the same phone number, the same everything, which was a colossal disaster there. So what happened? When did Biden notify Harris? How did he do this?
Biden notified her around lunchtime that day, on that Sunday. That was the Sunday right after the RNC debate had just finished. And Harris and her team, immediately started working the phones to try and solidify support with the Democratic Party, calling all of the sort of, movers and shakers, Pelosi and Schumer and Newsom and Pritzker and, both trying to avoid a primary and to get folks to come out and support them. And they made a decision that day, but they didn't have time to totally reinvent the wheel. But they didn't have time to move everyone from Wilmington down to D.C., that they didn't have time to go through all the hiring processes for new campaign managers, new officials, new everything. And for a while, I mean, some of the same, slogans and things were on the walls on the headquarters in Wilmington, which was pretty, surreal for the folks who were working there. And that in sort of that moment, her bet was, we're going to keep it the same way. We're going to try to, just pull this off through the same people on July 21st. We have a photo that we sort of obtained for the book. We weren't able to, we didn't publish in the book because we ended up not doing photos, but it's this photo taken inside the vice president's residence on July 21st after they've made all these calls. And she's wearing a Howard sweatshirt. She's, it's a Sunday afternoon, right? And they're all standing there and they're smiling. And, someone described the photo to us as they thought they were making history. I mean, in that moment, they thought when Biden was getting out of the race and she was in, that she was going to be able to pull this off.
Well, like I say, the consequences, and one of the things that I'll say, just editorialize for me, what a great interview and a great book. People have cultures. The Clinton people are not the Obama people. The Obama people are not the Biden people. Okay? And it just doesn't work. All right. It's not that the Clinton people didn't vote for Obama. Of course they did. It's not that the Obama people didn't vote for Harris or Biden. Of course they did. But you got to have your own people, man. It's just you might be in the same political party, but that's a different world. It's a different culture. They didn't understand that.
Well, and also in that moment, Jen O'Malley Dillon, who was a campaign manager, Harris brought in a few people later as senior advisors, the David Plouffe, Stephanie Cutter, various folks. But she thought in that moment that Jen O'Malley Dillon was who, she should keep. And I don't know if I'm going to let you make opinions on it, and I'm just going to say what happened.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the impulse, but it just does not, maybe she didn't have people. I don't know, but it was the same culture, the campaign. It was the same headquarters. And I've read, I think it's true that Biden said he didn't want her getting any distance between her and him when she ran.
Well, he called her on the day of a debate and said that. The day of a debate, he said, you got to remember I'm popular in Pennsylvania. I'm hearing there are people that are trying to tell you to back away from me. We've done a lot of good things in this administration. You should be touting them.
Oh God! Oh man! What a great book! What a series of really catastrophic decisions here. But you got to chronicle the facts, and congratulations.
He's done it. Josh, before we go, I'm going to tell you my favorite University of South Carolina story. You'll remember there was a Louisiana congressman named David Vitter, Republican, who was a very deceitful philanderer and womanizer. And Nikki Haley, in a speech in Washington, said, in South Carolina, we call our state university the Gamecocks. In Washington, that's what you call David Vitter. Anyway, Josh, this is a marvelous book, 2024. You and your co-authors have done a terrific job. Everybody out there, if you want to read one book, I think there are several good ones, but I think this may well be the best. And Josh Dawsey, as I told you, when you join the Wall Street Journal, we know the revolution is over. You are a fabulous reporter. Thank you.